This video is dedicated to both Steven Hillenburg and Stan Lee, who we unfortunately lost in 2018 respectively. Steven Hillenburg, born August 25, 1961, died November 26, 2018. And Stan Lee, born December 28, 1922, died November 12, 2018. Gone but never forgotten, we love you both 3000. And now, enjoy the video. The SpongeBob universe versus Thanos. Who would win? Okay, so here's the synopsis. Mr. Krabs would strike first. Since he's in the Navy, he would be really strong. He would put up a good fight, but all the Mad Titan has to do is pierce through his exoskeleton, and Mr. Krabs is done for. Plankton would see this as an opportunity to steal the formula and try to bargain with Thanos. But the Mad Titan will have none of that and squish the pest. Squidward, terrified of the Mad Titan, would probably try to impress him with some clarinet music. But the bad music would piss him off and he would end Squidward. Sandy would put up a good fight, but in the end, Thanos would overpower her. The only characters that have a chance to beat Thanos are SpongeBob and Patrick. Patrick, because if you cut off a limb, it'll grow back, and will eventually turn into millions of Patricks. And SpongeBob, because he's essentially indestructible. Just look at the last guy that tried to mess with SpongeBob. Karen would probably analyze Thanos and study his fighting style and come up with a plan to beat him. Pearl would probably shoot water at Thanos with her blowhole. It probably won't kill him, but it will stun him. The "my leg" guy would probably use his legs against Thanos, but it won't be effective. King Neptune would probably either use magic to beat Thanos, or unleash his inner baldness upon the Titan. Mrs. Puff would probably puff herself up and force Thanos to take boating lessons, and fail him. Gary would probably just throw slime at Thanos, but it's not very effective. Larry the Lobster would put up a good fight, but like Mr. Krabs, all Thanos has to do is pierce through the exoskeleton. And the Flying Dutchman would probably try to scare Thanos. Perch Perkins would probably keep us up to date on the Mad Titan's whereabouts. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy would then step in and take on the Mad Titan themselves. Man Ray and Dirty Bubble would side with Thanos at first, but then betray him in the end. Bubble Buddy would probably encase Thanos in a floating bubble. Bubble Bass would probably force Thanos to make a Krabby Patty and then criticize him for not putting pickles in it. The nematodes would probably eat all of Thanos' armor. The jellyfish would probably sting the living shit out of Thanos. The Alaskan bullworm would probably swallow Thanos whole, but all he has to do is cut open his stomach. And if all that fails when Thanos says, "I am inevitable," SpongeBob would appear with the gauntlet and respond,
"And I am ready."
With Bikini Bottom in ruins, a terrified SpongeBob looks down upon a seriously wounded Patrick. He tells SpongeBob to go kick his purple ass before dying. SpongeBob, jiggling with rage, goes to hunt down the purple bastard. He finds the Mad Titan and the two duke it out. Their battle shook the earth. With SpongeBob badly wounded, Thanos does his signature "I am inevitable," but when he snaps his fingers, nothing happens. Turns out SpongeBob pulled the old switcheroo on Thanos, and he had the Infinity Stones, and he gave out his signature line, "I'm ready." With Patrick gone, and most of Bikini Bottom destroyed, SpongeBob sits in his pineapple, depressed about the death of his best friend. Sandy, Mr. Krabs, and a reluctant Squidward go to check on their little yellow friend. SpongeBob proceeds to tell them that there's no point in carrying on because he can't live without his best friend. Mr. Krabs tries to cheer him up with a trip to the Krusty Krab, but SpongeBob has lost his touch on the Krabby Patty. Squidward tries to cheer SpongeBob up with a little clarinet solo. The sponge thanked Squidward for trying, but it wasn't enough. Sandy finally took SpongeBob to her tree dome to show him her latest invention. SpongeBob was amazed by what Sandy showed him. Why, it was a time machine! Sandy explained that they could use the time machine to stop Thanos from obtaining the Infinity Stones. And SpongeBob thought, maybe there's still time to save Patrick. And the little yellow sponge happily accepts the task. So SpongeBob, Sandy, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs all travel back in time, along with Plankton, Mrs. Puff, Karen, and Pearl. The gang would then split into 3 groups. While Plankton, Karen, and Mr. Krabs were tasked with the Space and Power Stones, Mrs. Puff and Pearl the Soul and Reality Stone, and SpongeBob, Squidward, and Sandy the Mind and Time Stone. While Mr. Krabs and Plankton fight over who should get the secret formula, Karen tries to analyze where the Space and Power Stones might be. But she's not getting anywhere because of Mr. Krabs and Plankton's bickering, and she tells them if they don't stop fighting and Thanos gets the Infinity Stones, then there will be no Krusty Krab. Soon the two stop their fighting and the trio set off. With Karen's help, the 3 managed to obtain the Space and Power Stones, but the task wasn't easy. They literally had to destroy another planet to get to the stones. And Plankton was surprisingly upset by this. And Mr. Krabs surprisingly agrees with Plankton. The two agree to set aside their differences, and the trio travel back to the present. Meanwhile, Mrs. Puff and Pearl went after the Space and Reality Stones. On their way, they bump into Patchy the Pirate, who helps them on their quest. It took Pearl's size, Mrs. Puff's skill of driving, and Patchy's obsession with SpongeBob to obtain the stones from Loki, the god of mischief. And trust me when I say this, it wasn't easy. And if you thought the Space Stone was difficult, Patchy the Pirate had to beat some other pirate at a staring contest to get the Reality Stone. But at last, Patchy, Pearl, and Mrs. Puff got the 2 stones and finally set back to the present. SpongeBob, Sandy, and Squidward were tasked with the Mind and Soul Stones. The Mind Stone wasn't easy, for SpongeBob had to give Vision 6 Krabby Patties in order to get it. The Soul Stone, however, wasn't any easier. The trio had to visit Red Skull, who told them that one of them had to sacrifice themselves to get the stone. Squidward volunteers that he should be the one to sacrifice himself, but SpongeBob intervenes and says that he should go. And the two went off on each other. SpongeBob and Squidward were so busy arguing that they didn't notice Sandy jumping off the cliff until it was too late. This made SpongeBob very upset. First his best friend, now Sandy? The little sponge was about to give up, but Squidward had other ideas and told SpongeBob not to give up, and SpongeBob was touched by his word. After returning to Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, and the rest of the gang head over to the Chum Bucket so that Plankton and Karen can assemble an Infinity Gauntlet. Once the gauntlet was assembled, one of the heroes had to volunteer to wear the gauntlet and bring everyone back to life. SpongeBob volunteers, but Squidward insisted that he should be the one to wear it. Luckily, Plankton added a feature where the gauntlet could shapeshift, allowing it to fit on the hand that it's being put on. Squidward puts on the gauntlet and feels a horrible pain, so quickly he snaps his suction cups. And for a brief moment, Bikini Bottom was silent. Then a portal appeared, and out came the Mad Titan himself. He was made aware of SpongeBob's intentions and wasn't willing to give up without a fight. With the Mad Titan standing between them and victory, the battle for Bikini Bottom has officially begun. SpongeBob realizes there's only one thing to do. The gang must switch to their superpowers that they obtained in Sponge Out of Water.
The Invincible.
Using his bubble powers to blind the Mad Titan.
The Sour Note.
Using his clarinet skills to irritate the shit out of the Mad Titan.
Sir Interlocked.
Mr. Krabs has an armor upgrade which makes it difficult for Thanos to penetrate it.
And Plankton.
Using his powerful muscles to overwhelm the Mad Titan. Other characters such as Mrs. Puff, Pearl, Karen,
even Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy join the fight.
Soon, everyone in Bikini Bottom joined in to fight the Titan. Despite their efforts, the Mad Titan still gets the upper hand on our heroes. Mr. Krabs is nervous that they might have lost, but SpongeBob isn't willing to give up and tells his friends to keep fighting. While the rest of Bikini Bottom fights the Titan's army, SpongeBob goes after Thanos himself. The two get into a huge brawl that shook the ocean. But despite his efforts, Thanos manages to overpower the sponge. As he's about to snap his fingers, the Mad Titan says, "I am inevitable," and snaps. But to his surprise, nothing happens. Everyone looked up and saw Steven Hillenburg was resurrected, and he took his pencil with the stones and erased Thanos out of existence. With the Mad Titan defeated, Bikini Bottom was back to normal. Well, almost back to normal. A lot has changed for our brave heroes. Mr. Krabs and Plankton decide to set aside their differences and combine the two restaurants, naming it the Krusty Bucket. Mr. Krabs also became a lot more generous, giving both SpongeBob and Squidward the raise that they deserve. Squidward became a lot more cheerful and decided to go to school to improve his clarinet and art skills. But the little sponge was impacted the most out of the ordeal. He still had his kind nature, but he was a lot more calm about it. He took his driving test again for the 1,000,000th time and actually passed for once. But SpongeBob felt very depressed inside. SpongeBob spent the next few months in his pineapple. Squidward and Mr. Krabs tried to cheer him up, but the little sponge wouldn't budge. He couldn't get over the fact that Patrick and Sandy were gone. Not even Gary could cheer him up. Then the little sponge broke down crying. But the crying stopped when he heard something. It sounded like crying, and it wasn't coming from him. SpongeBob looked at the source of the noise and almost fell over in shock. There, right in front of him, was Patrick. The little sponge was confused. How is this even possible? Patrick explained that he was a sea star, and when Thanos cut off his arm, it regenerated into another Patrick. SpongeBob was so overjoyed that he could not contain his excitement, but that wasn't all. "Howdy, SpongeBob," said a voice. SpongeBob looked and almost fell over again. There was Sandy Cheeks standing in front of him. She then explained to SpongeBob about the cloning machine she made, in case of any emergencies like Thanos were to ever happen. But the little sponge didn't seem to care. He was just really happy to see his friends again. The word soon spread, and everyone in Bikini Bottom went to greet Patrick and Sandy, and they all lived happily ever after. Or so they thought.